When people rank college baseball teams, they usually tell you who they like, but not why those teams make sense. This video is built around roster construction and translation. Returning players matter, but so does fit. Portal ads matter, but only if the roles are clear. Coaching matters, but mainly in how it defines pitching usage, defensive consistency, and lineup stability over 4 months. So this isn't who looks talented in February. It's who is most likely to function as a winning team from February through June. The list starts with programs that are clearly relevant, and it ends with programs that are structured to contend. And the higher we go, the deeper we get, because that's how real evaluation works. And the first team we'll evaluate is number 10, Georgia Tech. They're on this list because offense is the easiest thing to trust year to year. And they had some big pickups for their offense this year, including Jaron Avicula from Cal and Von Lackey and Drew Burress coming back. Burress is already one of the most advanced hitters in the country, not just because he can do damage, but because his at-bats have shape. He makes pitchers work, he controls the zone, and he's comfortable hitting behind in counts without panicking. That's the kind of hitter who creates stability for everyone around him, because the lineup doesn't feel like it needs to force runs. And Tech isn't only Burress. This is a lineup with enough experienced bats to consistently score, especially against middle-of-the-conference pitching. They can win games without being perfect because they can create runs in normal ways. Base runners, situational execution, and extra base contact when mistakes show up. The reason Tech is 10th and not higher is pitching definition. Upside is not the same as certainty. A lot of programs have arms who can flash a good outing. The teams at the top have weekend roles that hold for months. If Tech establishes a reliable weekend rotation early, the ceiling rises quickly. If not, they'll still be dangerous, but more as a beat anyone in a regional type than a national seed profile. Up next is the University of Virginia, led by their new head coach, Chris Pollard. Virginia's here because the roster makes sense on paper in a way that usually translates as the season gets longer. Eric Becker returning matters because he stabilizes both the infield and the lineup structure. He's the kind of player whose impact is less about one loud tool and more about consistent decision-making, turning the lineup over, executing in situations, and making big defensive plays that prevent innings from snowballing. Those things are a big part of why teams survive close games and others don't. AJ Gracia adds athleticism and run production to this team, and he's a top-end draft prospect. And it matters that this isn't just a name ad. It changes the lineup geometry. It gives them another threat that can create pressure without needing 3-run homers. The main point with Virginia is role clarity. Portal additions that overlap skill sets create friction. Too many guys trying to do the same job. Role-based additions are different. They make the team easier to manage, and they allow players to settle. Pitching is the question, and it's a real one. Turnover at the top of the staff often determines whether a team is hosting or traveling for a regional. But UVA's defensive foundation and lineup balance reduce volatility, which is why they belong in this range. This feels like a team that becomes more dangerous in April and May as rotation roles harden and the lineup finds its very best version. Next up is UNC. They're the type of program that consistently grades well in preseason evaluation because the floor is built into the structure. Gavin Gallagher gives them a true middle-of-the-order anchor, and the most important part of that isn't just that he's productive, it's that he's already been productive when the games get tighter. Postseason baseball punishes hitters who only thrive when conditions are comfortable. A bat that has shown it can function in high-leverage environments is a real separator. UNC's additions also speak to roster logic. Making Winslow slow behind the plate matters because catcher is a multiplier position, and they've had a guy like Luke Stevenson in the past who's been elite. It affects pitcher confidence, pitch efficiency, defensive stability, and how clean innings stay. Over 4 months, that can be the difference between a staff holding together or constantly pitching under stress. Jake Schaffner strengthens the middle infield defense, and that's part of why UNC tends to win close games. Defense at premium positions keeps innings from becoming extended. It turns 2-out trouble into inning breaks. That's how good teams keep their bullpen fresh. UNC isn't built to intimidate with tools in February. They're built to win series, grind through travel weekends, and be stable when everyone else is dealing with injuries and fatigue. The big question is whether they have the front-end pitching to become a true national seed. But even without that, their structure makes them hard to eliminate because they can win in multiple game types and rarely beat themselves. Tennessee is one of the hardest teams to place in a ranking like this because the talent is obvious, but the evaluation isn't only about talent, and that's why they come in at number 7. On the roster side, there's real SEC level ability. Levi Clark gives them power presence. Manny Marin adds athleticism and defensive flexibility, and Tegan Coons is part of a pitching group that has legitimate stuff. When you have that combination, lineup impact plus arms, you can win a lot of games even if you aren't perfect. So why aren't they higher? Because program identity matters most in the details that don't show up in a roster list. Role definition, bullpen management, situational consistency, and the ability to play the same quality of baseball on a random road weekend as you do in a home marquee series. Post Tony Vitello, the question is, will Tennessee still be talented? They will. The question is how repeatable the execution is. The best programs don't just have good players, they make game management easy. They know who pitches when, they know what they're trying to do offensively, and they don't reinvent themselves every weekend. That's what Tennessee is proving now, sustainability. The floor is still high because the roster is too strong to fall apart, but the ceiling depends on whether this version becomes predictably good, not just intermittently explosive. If the staff roles are clean early and the team plays with stable decision-making in tight games, Tennessee can climb rapidly, and if those pieces take time to settle, they can still be a postseason team, but less likely to separate into the elite tier immediately. Next, we move on to Georgia, whose ranking reflects volatility driven primarily by pitching turnover. Offensively, Colby Branch and Trey Phelps provide proven SEC production. These are not projection pieces. They've already performed against the highest level competition, and that stability matters. The pitching staff, however, has been aggressively rebuilt through the transfer portal after they lost so many arms to the draft last year. Joey Volchko and Matt Scott were brought in with the expectation of handling weekend roles immediately, signaling urgency and a belief that structural change was necessary. Portal-heavy rotations raise the ceiling, but they also introduce risk. Pitchers must adjust quickly to competition level, coaching philosophy, and usage patterns, often without gradual integration. If the arms settle early, Georgia has the offensive support and defensive foundation to compete with anyone in the SEC. If not, they remain dangerous but inconsistent. That wide range of outcomes keeps Georgia just outside the top tier despite the upside, and that's why they fall in here at number 6. Now, we get into the top 5 with the Auburn Tigers. This is where we get into the part of conversation where roster construction begins to matter more than just the raw talent. Griffin Graves' emergence last season provided Auburn with a reliable starting option, reducing strain on the bullpen. Ryan Heltzler also adds flexibility, allowing Auburn to adapt roles based on workload and matchups. Offensively, Auburn does not rely on star power. The lineup is experienced, physical, and capable of grinding at bats. This is a roster built to handle attrition and still produce consistently. What separates Auburn is development. Players improve year by year. Pitchers find defined roles. Depth turns into innings, and innings turn into wins. This program does not overhaul identity annually. They replace losses without reinventing themselves, which creates stability over time. Auburn may not dominate headlines, but they consistently play meaningful baseball late because their roster construction prioritizes sustainability over flash. Moving on, at number 4, we have the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Mississippi State's rise is driven by structural change. Brian O'Connor's arrival immediately impacts pitching organization, developmental timelines, and game management. His history suggests improvements not just in results, but in process. Ace Reese gives Mississippi State a true middle-of-the-order presence, a bat that changes games without needing protection, and that's why he fell into our top 10 players video, which you should check out after this. Noah Sullivan adds versatility and leadership, and Aiden Teal improves athleticism and lineup balance. Teal coming from Virginia with Brian O'Connor. The roster is older, it's deeper, and more clearly defined than in recent seasons. Pitching roles are no longer theoretical, and defensive alignment supports run prevention. What stands out is clarity. Players know their roles. The staff understands how it wants to deploy arms, and that structure reduces volatility over a full season. The remaining variable is cohesion, but the roster composition suggests a team ahead of schedule and capable of sustaining success rather than spiking inconsistently. Now we move into the top 3 with the University of Texas Longhorns. They sit at the threshold where championship potential becomes extremely realistic. This roster was built with immediacy in mind. Carson Tinney from Notre Dame, a catcher, stabilizes the catching position and improves game management. And Aiden Robbins from Seton Hall adds left-handed power without forcing lineup reshuffling. Timo Becerra strengthens infield defense and offensive consistency. This is a veteran-heavy roster constructed specifically for SEC competition. There are very few developmental pieces and much more finished products. What stands out is role clarity. These are players who know what they are expected to do, which matters in a conference where games are often decided by one inning. Texas is built to win structured games, not chaotic ones. They prioritize defined bullpen usage, clean innings, and predictable at-bats. The vulnerability is timing. If this group clicks early, Texas can separate quickly, and if it takes time, the SEC schedule does not wait. That tension defines their placement at 3. Next up, we move on to the reigning national champions, the LSU Tigers. They remain one of the deepest teams in the country. Derek Curiel profiles as a future elite player, offering both offensive impact and defensive value. Stephen Milam already plays with advanced instincts and decision-making, anchoring the infield. On the mound, Kason Evans and Gavin Guidry led a staff with velocity, depth, and matchup flexibility. LSU's ability to replace departing stars through the portal and internal development remains unmatched nationally. What separates LSU is versatility. They can win with power, they can win with pitching, and they can overwhelm opponents with depth over a weekend. Over a full season, however, balance becomes critical. Elite talent wins series. Complete structure wins championships. LSU is still defining its optimal lineup combinations and pitching usage across 4 months. That gap is small, but at this level, small gaps matter. They are built to win. The final step is cohesion. And now, it's obvious who's coming in at number 1, the UCLA Bruins. They rank first heading into the 2026 season because of roster completeness and structural clarity. This is not a team built around one dominant trait. It's a team built around how the pieces fit together, and that distinction matters more as the season gets longer. Rock Chalowski is the centerpiece, and you can go check out our top 10 players video and see where he fits in. He's the most complete position player in college baseball, in my opinion, not just because of his tools, but because of how consistently he impacts games. Defensively, he stabilizes the middle of the infield, and that allows UCLA to be aggressive with pitching usage. Offensively, he doesn't force production, he controls at-bats, understands situations, and produces without needing protection behind him. But what separates UCLA is that Chalowski is not carrying the roster, he's anchoring it. Milavai Lavu provides physicality and power without comprising lineup balance. Roman Martin gives UCLA defensive flexibility and reliable contact skills, and Dean West sets the tone at the top with on-base ability and base-running intelligence. The pitching staff emphasizes depth, strike throwing, and clearly defined roles rather than velocity alone. That approach compounds over a season. UCLA can win in multiple game types. They are comfortable in low-scoring games and equally comfortable outlasting opponents in higher-scoring ones. Their weaknesses do not stack, their strengths travel. That is why UCLA enters 2026 as college baseball's standard. These rankings will change, but entering 2026, these teams represent the clearest examples of how winning college baseball rosters are built. If you disagree, explain why, not just who, in the comments. That's where the real conversation starts.